Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to House of Footy. It's your boy Ray, and with me tonight, I've got Mac.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mac. It is Christmas Eve, and by the time you guys hear this, it will be Christmas Day. So, in advance, Merry Christmas to all of you guys. Festive season, but of course, the football doesn't stop, and we have a good selection of matches from Match Week 18 to discuss. Before we get into it, though, don't forget to follow us on our social medias, both on X and Instagram. Our handle is at @houseof_footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. And lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We love hearing from you guys, and we want you guys getting involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. Let's start the podcast then, Mac, with top of the table match between Arsenal and Liverpool at Anfield. Both two teams that we are, I guess, associated with, and so we had. Well, honestly, I missed the game, but you were able to watch the game, and I was able to watch back the highlights. And there's a lot of talking points, so let's get straight to it. Before I hand it over to you, I think it was overall 1-1 tie, a fair result. But like I said, a lot of talking points. So let's hear it from you. What were your thoughts on this game?
Overall, a very exciting game. Normally, when if you see a lot of these top competitions face each other, top teams face each other, where it seems more of like a cage match, where things get slow, they're very methodical, and things are very cagey between the two teams. But it felt like both teams had the intention to be able to go out and find a winner if there was possible. But they came across physical, determined opposition to be able to meet them. I thought going in, if you were to say the biggest takeaways, is where I would argue in terms of center half pairings, you're looking at two of the best combinations in not just the Premier League, but in world football on display at that moment, with Saliba and Gabriel for Arsenal. Well, in my opinion, probably are the best, if not in the conversation for the best. And on his day, Konate playing beside, of course, Virgil van Dijk is as good as you can get when Konate's playing right. And he was right in this game against Arsenal, where it felt like there were a lot of opportunities it potentially built up to create for Liverpool and Arsenal. But both the center halves, the defensive midfielders, the players around them did a good enough job stymieing that, where it didn't feel like there wasn't a methodology in terms of how they wanted to be able to get into final third. There wasn't aggressive attacking players willing to take on their man. It felt like that was there, and there was still excitement in the match. But just based off the performance from the defensive end, there wasn't, let's say, that amazing save you need from a goalkeeper, or it wasn't more of a traditionally high-scoring affair, which you would get in this matchup, which, if I recall correctly, is the highest-scoring Premier League tie in Premier League history. So overall, I think you were absolutely spot on in terms of the fair result. Definitely a couple interesting talking points to be able to go throughout. But at the end of the day, I think just with the fact of being at home for Liverpool, they might be a little bit more disappointed than Arsenal. But I think it's a fair result. Both clubs are happy with the tie, take it away, and kind of play out the rest of the season going against kind of the smaller teams and seeing who can perform better there, to which then, of course, will help very much decide what potentially be a very good title race between these two teams, and of course, Man City and teams in around that area of the table right now.
Yeah, no, exactly. Very entertaining match from what it looked like. And just start the talking points straight from the beginning. Any surprises for the lineups? For me, Cody Gakpo starting ahead of Nunez. It's surprising, but I guess it's not, for as a Liverpool fan, it's not necessarily the end of the world. It is just eye-catching that, Klopp went with Gakpo instead of Nunez in a game where, maybe Liverpool at home just needed that extra little bit to push them over the edge. But of course, he did come on to play in the, I believe, in the second half. And so not a horrible or crazy choice to go with Gakpo in the starting lineup. For Arsenal, though, pretty standard lineup. The one thing I would say is, whether you take this positive or negatively, Havertz starting in that left center mid position is kind of accepted now. I feel like a lot of people won't really bat an eye, whereas, of course, beginning of the season, you don't really associate him with that position, and you're still thinking, is Arteta doing the right thing? What's sort of the plan here? So apart from that, those were just quick things that I thought were interesting from the lineups. But moving into early, oh, sorry, go
But
ahead,
I
Matt.
want to jump in and talk about the lineups because I think they're very interesting and very similar in a lot of ways. Where I think the substitution and the switch from Nunes to Gakpo, and Havertz in his role with Arsenal, and he's definitely, I think he settled in. I don't necessarily say he made his position his own, but it's he's at the level where he's not just acceptable, he's doing well in that position for Arsenal and the role that he plays, and it's very similar. Where Gakpo, even though he's, I don't think you necessarily think of him as an aerial threat, but what he is good at, and when a long ball does come up to him, and similar to with Havertz, they're able to take control, have a little bit of composure, and be able to bring in their teammates. Where personally, I don't think that's Nunes where his strength is at yet. He's more of a chaos agent, and that's why when he came on, he was still playing out wide because a lot of the play for both teams similarly were, okay, we're not going to get a lot of joy against these two center halves. How can we be able to attack out wide, kind of hold up positions there? And that's why you saw Gakpo a lot of the time when he was getting a long ball going to him, he wasn't near Gabriel. He was trying to play as close to as possible of Zinchenko to be able to play off him there, similar to Havertz going as close to Trent as possible in that position when they would go long to be able to get out. So I think it was interesting those switches were made. I think it was a smart call from both managers. And I think it's set up with the intent, okay, yeah, we know we're not going to get joy in those areas of the pitch. What are different ways that we can exploit them? And I would think both teams, I think Liverpool did a little bit better job of exploiting that than Arsenal. But I see the methodology from the managers of how they want to be able to get at the opposition, and it made a lot of sense for me. Liked it.
Yeah, exactly. It's fascinating that even, we think, of course, we think we know the game, but of course we don't know the game as much as they do. But even at that top level, they're able to tweak small things that just a regular fan would not really notice until after the game and after an analysis of the game. But moving quickly straight into the first goal, happened inside 4 minutes. Gabriel opens the scoring from a free kick played in by Odegaard. One thing I wanted to note about this one is height and athleticism for Arsenal has come and out of, I guess, taken me by surprise. Maybe not as much for Arsenal fans and maybe other fans in the league, but just the fact that, of course, you have now Saliba, Gabriel, Declan Rice, Havertz as well, and even if you want, you can bring Tomiyasu, Ben White, as part of those taller, more athletic players to deal with and add another sort of level of attack to a team that has already so many ways to hurt you. So that's just interesting that I thought. And should Allison have done better in that for that free kick? What do you think?
I think that's a tad harsh. I think he necessarily, because he's caught in the no man's man in a little bit where he was maybe do I come out, maybe do I not? And the header was still decent enough. It was put in closer enough to the side netting where I don't look at him too harshly. And in that position, it's very difficult to deal with. I do think, though, in terms of the Arsenal, their height, to kind of exemplify that, where for their corner kicks, if you notice, Declan Rice is not even inside the box for their own corner kicks. That's how, I guess, big and strong and tall that they are. That, okay, yeah, we can have a 6 foot, a guy that used to play center half in his Chelsea youth days, just sitting away from the net, not really worrying about and dealing with the counter, which we can talk about his Jon Snow moment later. But definitely, I think a tad harsh on Allison for that, in my opinion. But I think mostly, again, it's the defending, the high line, not understanding when to go from Liverpool was the problem, where, again, Gakpo took a step early, and that what caused Gabriel to be onside. So I look at more at that, where it wasn't a unified drop to be able to manage and deal with the free kick from Arsenal, less so for Allison, for me.
Yeah. Small margins, and honestly, a decent ball will always catch defenses out of position. So that is credit to Odegaard. So let's move on to another quick talking point, which is the penalty appeal for Liverpool. And the player I'm referring to is, I think it's a free kick taken by Trent Alexander-Arnold. Bounces back to him. He plays it into Salah's feet, and he takes a touch trying to go around trying to get around Odegaard. It does touch his hand, and there's of course a lot of people talking about that as it's not given. But I guess I'll toss it to you first, then Mac. What were your thoughts on that decision?
I want to tackle, if it's okay, both penalty shouts at the exact same time. Where one, for me, I think if we're going to compare and contrast between the two, the Odegaard situation, again, the reason why, and if you, the VAR, the reason why they've reviewed it back is that his hand wasn't in an unnatural position. He was falling down and it was unintentional. For me, I feel like if I'm a Liverpool fan, I'm a Liverpool supporter. I've seen those calls been made. I've seen that penalty be given. I've seen that happen week in, week out in the Premier League. Again, if we're going by the letter of the law, I understand why it wasn't, but I think it was very favorable to Arsenal of why it wasn't called. Conversely, with the Havertz penalty shout towards the end of the game where Trent kind of goes into his back, for me, again, I have seen those called. I think that one would be extremely harsh for Liverpool if that was called, where it didn't seem like the whole was. Again, he did go into his back slightly, but Havertz was looking for it the entire time, and it was an egregious, I would say, a dive in some ways, where again he's just dropping. He's like, okay, a little bit of top of that back, I'm going down. Maybe he's been playing with Gabriel Jesus just a little bit too long, and that impact is out on him. Who knows? Call him out there. But I think both of them in some ways, reason why they're being looked at more critically and critically is because of previous calls we've seen in the Premier League, and that's kind of clouding people's judgment. Where for me, if we're following the letter of the law, I don't like the Odegaard rule, but that's the rule, so it shouldn't be called. Done. Havertz should also not be called. Neither of those should be talking points, in my opinion. And I think both fans, even though they could feel a little aggrieved based off previous happenings, kind of cancels each other out. That's how I net out after these two penalty shots. What about you?
Yeah, no, greatly put there, and I don't want to move on from it because there's some more talking points on that. So the only thing I would say is I can see, as a Liverpool fan myself, and I think it was fair that it wasn't given, but on another day, I can definitely see it given.
Absolutely.
The only thing I would say is, and this is now a reference to basketball, if you see a player, regardless if it's purposely done or not, if a player is sort of blocking a bounce pass with his feet, it's most of the time automatically called a kickball. Same, I guess, idea and rule for soccer or football. And so I can see why a lot of fans are thinking it should be handball. I think it happens anywhere on the pitch. It should be given, or it's most likely given. But I can definitely understand with the letter of the law and just how things have happened this season, why it wasn't given. And I just want, of course, coming next season, and a larger topic is just more consistency around that. But let's move on from that just quickly before we talk about, of course, now we have to talk about the Liverpool goal. Maybe a downside to having still not your 100% wide backs that Arsenal fans would like, but got to give big credit to Trent Alexander-Arnold for that pass to Salah, who cuts in, goes past Zinchenko, and then smashes the near post. I think kind of out of nothing, but when you have Salah, that's something that, like, I think in our group chat you said that's something you have to be ready for, and it's something that, of course, Liverpool fans should be very grateful to have. What are your thoughts on that?
I think, again, he's absolute class killer from Mohamed Salah. The pass from Trent kind of creates it where, again, he just puts him in his position where he skips every Arsenal defender, is able to put one of his best attacking player in a position one-on-one, isolated against, I would argue, Arsenal's weakest defender. And very poor from Zinchenko. If I'm looking from Arsenal perspective, you got to know. You got to use the baseline as another defender. Salah, is going to go on his left foot. If you force him to his right, he's got nothing. But it was just a glaring mistake and the weakest part of his game. And why I think you very pointed out, a lot of Arsenal fans were talking going into the game where that would be like Jurriën Timber, and being in that position where he was playing in for the Community Shield, but of course since his injury hasn't featured, and against these teams, these margins of Zinchenko making that mistake is the difference. But that does not take away like the absolute killer class that Salah has in that moment, realizing, okay, this is the guy I'm gonna have. I'm gonna cook him. It's done. And how he's able to kind of just take it near post, where if you look at David Raya's positioning, where he's guessing that he's going to go far post, he's already starting to make a little bit of momentum there, and Salah's just able to ham it near post top side, leaving Raya with no chance. Where even though, if you ask me and you know me, is that if a goalkeeper gets scored on near post, it's probably their fault. I think this is one of the few times that, like, no, he just got kind of outmatched in that position. And it was just unfortunate because you're playing at such a player at the peak of his powers, the highest of moments, by having the quality to be able to do that. So absolute class from Salah. Love to see that. Okay, that's a lie. Okay, love to see that for him. Great for him. But at the same time, I'm like, God damn it, Zinchenko, you have one job right now. Show him the line, his weak foot. What are we doing? But again, class from Salah, class from Trent. Well-deserved equalizer.
Okay, interesting, of course, but of course, the last point in the game before we talk about what this means is the Trent Alexander-Arnold chance at the end, where you see, of course, that image that's been surfacing everywhere. It's like 5 Liverpool attackers, and it's just Declan Rice by himself at the back. Trent gets the chance, but it bounces just as he hits it, and then it just, of course, hits the crossbar, doesn't go in. That, of course, I'm okay with that, but if it was a different player leading the counter and Salah getting on the end of that, I would expect it to be a goal. But ultimately, points are shared, and I guess for me, just before I toss it back to you for your final thoughts on the game, this for result, this I think does benefit Arsenal because a little bit more, just because like last season, in a different manner, they were able to only get a point at Anfield. But it was sort of a game of two halves, whereas this game, it looked like, and just looking at the stats, matched in terms of shots. Liverpool had one extra shot on target more. Possession essentially 50-50. Passes even 442 to 423. So a very, very even match. And so big credit to Arsenal for being able to come to Anfield. Tough place to play and get a point. And of course, it didn't look like at certain times it was Arsenal's game to go and win. And then, of course, Liverpool had their chances. So that's overall my take. What are your last takes on the result?
I think that's spot on in terms of what this means for Arsenal and why it's important. They have a couple of tough matchups going in, playing against West Ham at home and then Fulham, so a couple of London derbies where if they are exit kind of the holiday season with between those 3 games with 7 points, that's a huge success. So this is kind of the first step where I think if you're expecting to be able to pull up a win at Anfield, might have been tough. We should go back to that one chance before just wrap up my thoughts on this game as a whole. I think everyone kind of noticed the pitch wasn't the greatest condition. So even though I would agree with you, maybe you don't want Mohamed Salah in that he wanted to be able to receiving that pass versus giving it. I think that was kind of expected. Everyone was slipping, ball was bouncing consistently throughout the game. At least that's what I noticed a lot of. So it was a little bit tough there, but I do have to enjoy the memes after the game of course, the Declan Rice, Jon Snow, Battle of Bastards moment, where he's just the one man against the army coming, waving his sword, and he did it just enough, and he just barely survived, even though I feel like he had 0 impact. And going around the clip, what really killed me the most is where the 2 fastest people in the counterattack were the least people that I didn't realize they had this level of pace. If you look at both sides, how William Saliba completely outran Szoboszlai, and then of course Trent Alexander-Arnold beating like Gravenberch all the way down. I'm like, okay, whoa. Yeah. Let's check the FIFA stats. What are the pace numbers for these guys? And they need to be corrected. So lovely to see there. But in terms of Liverpool, though, I think this is still good enough because I think both these teams in some ways need some January signings if we're going to look at them as kind of a complete puzzle. There's still a little bit of holes that need to be filled, still a little bit gaps that need to be covered. I think both teams have different areas of the pitch to address, but this is good enough for now to set them on the way of what they want to do by the end of the season. And it was great to see both these teams play at such a high level.
Yeah, I mean, some could argue still this is a Liverpool team that is in a small transition, still new players coming in. So, can't really ask for more than being second at Christmas in the Premier League. Of course, Arsenal getting to Christmas at the top of the table with that Aston Villa tie at Sheffield United. Sorry, at home to Sheffield United, where they actually needed a goalkeeping mistake and a Zaniolo goal to really rescue that point from home. So, interesting result there. But let's quickly, before we wrap up this part of the podcast, let's discuss Spurs, Everton. Spurs won 2-1 at home to Everton. Of course, my second team, Spurs, and my other team, Everton. I think this was, again, I rely a lot on highlights, but another banger of a match where Spurs start early, start by scoring early at home, and then in the second period, Everton were able to come into the game, had chances to tie it and even win it. So it's just a toss-up. I'm not exactly sure what we really learned from this game from both teams, but what were your thoughts overall on the game, Mac?
A couple quick points I want to be able to make sure I address specifically in this game. For one, Spurs. it feels very similar to Arsenal last year, where they're high flying, they're attacking, they're pressing. It seems almost to a ninth degree of how aggressive they are and how kind of willing that they are to be able to put pressure on the opposition. And if you watch just the first 30 minutes of this match, you would think that Spurs are the best team in the world because of their attacking pressure that they were able to put on this Everton team. But a couple things happen. They relent, and then they get exposed. So what they need to do, and one of the key chances of the game that kind of screams out to me, is where they scored their first goal through Richarlison, and almost 2 minutes later, Brennan Johnson kind of missed almost like a half tap in, and then Son went on to score it again. If they had kind of all three of those goals, the game is done and dusted. But in the Premier League with a 2-0 lead, and you lose any momentum, and the momentum change for me happened, I think it's when Basuma had to come off. Not Basuma. It was Idrissa Gana Gueye had to be able to come off injured, if I remember correctly. And then Andre Gomes came on. That was the turning point where Everton then kind of took on the pressure, and he was the difference. Andre Gomes, with his creativity, with his final third passing, with his composure, a kind of the forgotten man of the Toffees, came on and had such a large impact. Very interested to see how he's employed going forward for Everton, because he created quite a few chances for Jack Harrison, for DCL, goal that was called back, of course, and then, of course, ended up going on to score the goal off a corner kick. And I think even created the last chance for Everton to be able to end up where it's getting cleared off the line. So he was absolutely vital. But Spurs, what they need to do either, it's still early stages for Postecoglou, still early days, but either they need to be more clinical in those moments where if they do concede a goal and have that little bit of weakness defensively, which Everton were given quite a few chances, couldn't finish. They have to kill that game early, even if they still get scored on a goal and have that mistake in them, that they're comfortable enough. Or they need to be able to figure a way is to set up shop and accept and understand, okay, we have a 2-0 lead. What can we do to see it out? Still keep your attacking flair, still keep your pressure, but not be so rambunctious, be so, I'll say cavalier with the kind of the lead that you have. So again, it'd be interesting to see which way they go, but still early days, lucky for them to come out with this position. And that's in terms of the Spurs side. Everton, absolutely no problem. The greatest thing that could have happened to them is those points reduction, and it's absolute great performance. On another day, in all likelihood, I would argue that they should have won the match with the opportunities they created. They're just missing that little bit of extra quality, I would say, in that final third, where like DCL, he had a breakaway, just a poor touch. McNeil had a couple of moments. Jack Harrison had a couple of moments. I think that if they had a little bit more of a quality, it'd be very interesting to see the type of team that Sean Dyche could make, because what he's doing with these boys is phenomenal. And forever, like, long may it reign, because again, this team is going to climb up the table just as they would have done if they didn't get, maybe not, but as they would be right now if they didn't get that point reduction.
Yeah, point reduction, and then of course Andre Gomes coming out of the shadows and then just putting in this type of performance, which to your point, I really feel they were hard done by for the DCL goal that was called back. I do not think that was a foul on Emerson Royale, which VAR eventually called back. But credit to Andre Gomes, and in our last podcast I did mention player by the name of Dele Alli. Maybe he could come in as well and add a little bit more fuel to this Everton team. Not necessarily that they need it, but hey, Danjuma had a couple chances at the end where it was literally inches. Watching the replay back, it was inches from it crossing the line to get a tie at Spurs. So great shout for Everton, and great result. Well, great positive signs. Unfortunately, not getting that result there ultimately. But what were your thoughts, man?
My last thought: I would not want to play on the same team as Danjuma as a striker. Like, he is he's so singular. Where there's a couple moments where Beto was running into the box, open for a tap in, and Danjuma was like, "No, I got this." He was having his moment. Again, he very well could have scored. Potentially, there's some really good qualities there, but I feel like he just lacks that composure, or maybe a little bit of understanding of how to move the ball. I think he had a little bit, not to kind of put it too harshly, but again, the one that I go back to over the last couple of weeks that screams out to me is the Diego Dallo moment when he doesn't cross to Højlund. It's just a disgrace. He should have done it. Poor decision making. But I would absolutely hate to play with him. But he, again, like you said, he could have won it. He didn't, so that's why I can say comfortably, I would hate to play with him.
Yeah, and of course, not the first time we're going to reference a ball that should have been played across to get it to happen in this podcast. But just quickly wrapping up this part of the podcast, I want to mention that something that I thought about regarding Spurs. 2 early goals, Richarlison and Brennan Johnson scoring. Richarlison and Son scoring. Brennan Johnson looks good. Kulusevski improving from last season. I think it's a benefit and a curse that Spurs have lost Kane, because it allows more players to come in and step up to the plate, and actually then you can spread the goals around. My only fear is, I know that you kind of referenced Spurs being close to Arsenal in that they were very free flowing. My concern is they'll be the Man U from last season, where a lot of different goal scorers and Rashford was really, really good. My fear is next season, if goals dry out, or even later through this season, if goals dry out, there's no talisman that will step up. And I'm hoping that maybe Richarlison or Son or one of those guys will continue to step up for Spurs this season. But that's just something that I thought about, which, of course, if Kane was here, you can expect at least 20 Premier League goals from Kane at the end of the season. So something we'll keep an eye out for. But let's take a quick break here, guys, and then we'll be back with some more Premier League football to talk about. So stay with us. Welcome back to Hustle Footy, guys. We are going to continue our podcast now, discussing another match from this weekend, and that is West Ham 2, Manchester United 0. David Moyes getting a win over his previous team against a team that I think a Man U team that had some changes. Of course, Cam Walla had to make his debut at centre back for Man U, but a game where Man U had a lot of the ball, but weren't able to do too much in it. Had a couple chances, but eventually I think it's just the quality that West Ham had, and some fortunate bounces that came their way ultimately put them over the edge, and they won the game, which makes the table and everything else look more interesting after that. But what were your thoughts on the 2-0 win from West Ham, Mac?
I thought it was stereotypical West Ham. It was kind of what would be it's like too pristine class of what type of football that David Moyes would want from the Hammers at the moment, where they're sound defensively, they don't give away many chances. Again, we can talk about the Manchester United portion in a bit, but I want to start off by giving the flowers to the West Ham players and what they were able to do is where kind of they denied central spaces, they make sure that they covered runs into the box, pushed everyone to the outside, and just let kind of Manchester United circulate the ball kind of as a large U around them as need be, and were able in the key moments in their counter-attacking ways find enough quality in those key moments where they know that going in and walking into most games, they're not going to get 10, 11, 12 shots on target. They are not that type of team. What they need to do is in their 3 opportunities, they need to score 2. And that's exactly what they did in this game, where players like Mohamed Kudus, Jared Bowen, and Paquetá have that nature about them where they don't need kind of a gluttony of chances to be able to get on the score sheet. And their chemistry between the 3 of them, I was noting it down watching the game, and it was even highlighted more watching Match of the Day afterwards, where how the 3 of them connect and understand how to be creative. When West Ham do get the spell possession, a lot of the times it's actually the 3 of them in midfield positions, and the Thomas Souček or the James Ward-Prowse or Edison Alvarez, they're in attacking quote-unquote striker positions because they're letting their 3 kind of creative players cook, try to be able to create combination passes between the 3 of them. They're able to link play between the 3 of them very well and utilize more of those, I would say, more traditional, like a center attacking role, like striker runs and play off of them versus starting off as that focal point. Because normally, I would say years before, it was Antonio a lot of the times that they would play. Okay, that's the kind of the base, kind of the tempo that we're going to play off of. Now it's okay, we're going to kind of use other players to fill up those positions, and based off the creativity between and the exchanging of positions between those 3 players, they're able to kind of get those final third moments. And then, of course, in this game especially, and in games previously against higher end competition, they take their chances. And again, for you especially, I know you love both of these goal scorers and all 3 of those players. I know that you're very happy to see that. But again, this is the West Ham of Hammer fans' dream right now, and they're doing what they need to do. And a complete reversal of how they played last year. And I love the change in style and the transition that they're able to make to those 3 specific players.
Yeah, honestly, I gotta give props to David Moyes, who I guess I got to apologize now. I think on behalf of myself, maybe a little bit of House of Footy, because I thought, end off with the I think it was the Europa Conference League last season ticket, sail off into the sunset, and maybe see what else is out there for you. But he's gone and, like you said, reimagined the way this West Ham team attacks and plays, which is refreshing because at certain points, you think a manager that's so seasoned is going to be stuck to his ways, maybe very much like Sean Dyche. But David Moyes has proven that he can, with players that he has brought in and changes that he's made to that lineup, not necessarily relying on a out-and-out striker, to still, get the goods from them. So big credit to West Ham, who I think, like I said, played to their game plan excellently, and then of course were rewarded by the 2-0 result. Even though I would argue the Bowen the Bowen goal was a little bit fortunate, with Onana's save coming straight back to him.
Absolutely.
But again, Paquetá 2 assists, one to Bowen and one to Mohamed Kudus, who could have actually given away a goal early on. Garnacho put through after the Kudus back pass, and him not finishing and not being able to finish that 1v1 chance just summarizes how poor Man U have been offensively, well, in terms of output from those in the front line. And so, of course, a big concern for Man U fans. What are your thoughts there, Mac? Not a lot of chance creation. It feels like a lot of the chances were forced. And the passages of play were just, maybe they don't, of course, they're not having the greatest season, but it's not helping the decision making that some of those players are making on the pitch. And no disrespect, but with the likes of McTominay still in that midfield, Bruno Fernandes not making right decisions, and of course, Anthony and Garnacho not really supporting Hudgland as much as he would. What are your thoughts on that, Mac?
For me, it feels like the pieces don't fit together. There isn't a coherent attacking plan. You noted a stat, which I saw as well, I think is absolutely on point in terms of there was over 400 minutes played between the three attacking players that started the game, between Anthony, Garnacho, and Højlund, and yet they've only combined going from Anthony Garnacho to Højlund with 11 passes. It's absolutely horrendous in terms of just the creative attempts that you have. Yes, in a lot of the games, they don't have a lot of possession. But in games like this, going into it, you know exactly what they're going, you know exactly how West Ham are going to play. So you have a game plan. What are you trying to accomplish in the final third? Because they're going to not necessarily let you walk there, but they're going to give you a lot of space to get there and then apply pressure. So do you have the goods to be able to do something? And it seems like, at least as of right now, those players don't have it. The manager doesn't have an idea. And if you just look at it, let's go with basic bare stats, numbers here. They've scored 18 goals in the Premier League thus far. That's tied for second last in the Premier League. The team above them, Newcastle, by one place, has scored 36. A team that we would argue generally doesn't score many, many goals. So again, for me, it's just right now, defensively, they're getting a pass, even though Onana had horrible mistakes, I would argue, at the beginning of the season. And I agree with you, not great goalkeeping on the first goal here. The defense has stepped up. They have done just barely enough where I would argue they're not incompetent. They would, in terms of the top 6 to 8 teams in the Premier League, they're average. What's kind of holding them back, and has been the goal-scoring efforts in the final third. Have they gotten enough? And to the amount of money we drag on Chelsea in their midfield, amount of money spent, the amount of money Manchester United spend in the final third players between Anthony, Højlund, how much they're playing for Rashford, Bruno Fernandes, players like that. You expect not just a little bit better, you expect so much more. And they don't have it right now. Be interesting to see what they do going forward. But I think there are a lot of problems, a lot of holes. And for me, I know it's rough, but it does start at the manager of what is he trying to get out of this team? Because I know going into it, and he talked about, and this one of the famous quotes that he's always been kind of attributed to, where he wants to be the best transitional team in the world. Okay, but if the other team is playing a low block, and you have the ball, and you can't really transition against them, because they're already back there, what are you doing then? And it seems like that question has been yet to be answered, and on top of not being a great transitional team. So again, We'll see what happens. Not a great performance again. I think the Anfield result, by at least picking up White there, has kind of saved their blushes a little bit. A little bit fortunate in that game. Again, we talked about it on a previous podcast, so if you want to hear our thoughts, go back, listen to that. But I think as of right now, a lot of questions, a lot of problems, and it starts really now for me in the midfield, top of the pitch, defensively, at least good enough right now. They're able to plug in Johnny Evans and Kabawala or whatever his name is, and they still did decently enough for almost 70 minutes of the game. But if they had gotten a lead from one of those chances, it's a whole different game. They need to fix that before they can now fix those other issues, it seems like.
Yeah, it's tough because they a lot of things have gone wrong. A lot of things are going wrong, and a lot of things have gone wrong for Man U this season. And it comes to a point where it might be tough for Man U fans to hear this, but there's not a lot to play for in the remainder of the season, even though it's only Christmas. So yes, okay. What can we do from here? Maybe improve some of the players that you have currently employed. So maybe the chance that Kamwala gets, maybe he slowly features a little bit more. Yes, a lot of criticism has gone towards Garnacho, Anthony, and Hojlund, but they are young. Maybe let them make their mistakes now, and hopefully they can come good. But I think ultimately the marker of whether Ten Hag is still the manager at the beginning of next season is, can he improve them a little bit from now until the end of the season, and can he improve them if he's there next season moving forward, and see what that looks like. But honestly, it doesn't look great for Man U this year. In the year of 2023, they have 20 defeats already. So, you know, the last thing that I did want to mention is they have 20 defeats so far, and who they have next? Aston Villa. And one of my favorite tweets that I saw today was, of course, I think it was Man U that posted a thing, you know, we're hosting Villa in our next game, or facing Aston Villa in our next game, and then the reply was just take the 3 points, bro. Just stop this. So, unfortunately for Man U fans, that is the reality, but we'll keep an eye out for how that game goes. Let's move on then quickly to another game that took place this weekend, time of recording actually today, and that was Wolves versus Chelsea, the only game that took place today, but a game where, you know, we saw Chelsea lose again. Wolves now are up to 11th in the Premier League, tied on points with Chelsea, just a spot back based on goal difference. And a game that highlights a lot of, I think, the negative, I guess, the failings that Chelsea have still at this point, that they definitely have to figure out before the end of the season if they want to be challenging for those European spots next season. So what were your overall thoughts from this result, Mac?
I think it's a lot of the same issues for Chelsea that we experienced so far. Again, when I look at kind of the basic numbers going into this game of how things turned out, it was an even matchup where shots on target roughly around the same, total shots, possession, of course, Chelsea favored much more there. But in total, at the end of the day, chance creation, it was an even matchup. So have Chelsea, when they do have possession, are they clinical enough? Are they creative enough in the final third to create opportunities? No, and that's where they missed out for large portions of the game. I can't beg on them too much because when we just talked about Manchester United only having 18 goals, again, Chelsea, who we say are shite at scoring, have 29. What's going on? What is the difference? But again, they're still lower down the table. So again, defensively, they have a lot more questions than Manchester United, I would say, and definitely highlights in this game, especially. Again, one of the big successes, it seems like, of the recent transfer windows of Todd Bowley has been Badiashile, and he made another mistake that led to a Wolves goal, which really, in effect, kept them away from leading a point on this fixture. So a little bit rough there. For me, again, similarly to Manchester United, the final third, what are they doing there? How can they fix there? I understand Nkunku just came back from injury, came on to score. Great for him. Great to see him having impact. Phenomenal header. Originally, when I first saw it, I thought it was a mistake by him where he it slid off his head. It looked like it, but watching it back, just like the precision, the movement, absolutely on point. Is he kind of a talisman that can help solve some of their issues? I hope so. But it's getting to the point now with their performances where I'm not going to lie, I'm getting a little squinty eye at Pochettino, because one moment, if you notice, where you see, I think it was Nicholas Armada Broya comes off instead of Nicholas Jackson, I think it was in the game.
Yep.
And for me, that was shocking because Broy had played better so far. Normally, you just trust your manager, probably something we don't know, tactically, whatever. But now it's gone to the point where they're so porous in the final third. They make wrong decisions. Just like I'm going to call it Danjuma, horrible decision by Sterling. If you're going to shoot it and you don't score, you deserve to be able to get the goat horns. You deserve to get kind of made fun of online. You deserve that. But you should have passed it. But similarly, in those moments where Jackson's still not good enough, and I'm surprised Embroyo's the one that got the hook there. So I think they still have a lot to be able to figure out. The good part, in my opinion, it looks like their midfield does make a little bit more sense to me. Every single time I watch them or I see highlights of them, the midfield three of Caicedo, Fernandez, and Conor Gallagher, when he's not given a red card, seems to make a lot of sense, seems to work well. At least that's a platform they can be able to build off of. But they have a lot of areas, again, really all around that midfield three that they need to fix. And the worry is that to fix those, they might have to offload Conor Gallagher, which then causes another issue. So again, Chelsea, tough position. Unfortunate for them. They need to get things right. But great to see Wolves climb up the table. They've been playing well in certain weeks. They seem very, for me, hit and miss. On the given day, they can look like a rugged defensive opposition. On other days, they look like kind of a sieve. They look like they can cut through like a knife through, like a butter with a knife through butter.
Knife through butter.
Hot knife through butter. That's right. But again, today was their day where they're able to still hold up defensively enough to be able to secure all 3 points. So again, those are my quick thoughts from what I saw of this matchup.
Yeah, like you said, defensively, offensively, it's impressive. They have 29 goals in the Premier League, but defensively is really what's letting them down. And I know we talked about Man U a little bit. They have been getting a little better, but they still have more goals conceded than Chelsea in the Premier League. Sorry, they don't have as many goals conceded as Chelsea in the Premier League, and that's sort of what's telling about it is how poor they are, and that the fact that Lamina is getting on the end of a header set piece. I think this is definitely not the first time that's happened. It's definitely something that happened. I think it was against Brighton that I thought that's something that you just at the top level cannot be allowing to happen time and time again. And to add insult to injury, Badiashile, like you said, was supposed to be one of those players that look forward into the future. But it just shows, very much like Garnacho, when you're not informed, you're so prone and susceptible to making mistakes, and not necessarily even mistakes, but just not being able to deal with things convincingly, which leads Matt Doherty to finish Chelsea in a 2023 Premier League game. So, yeah, not great overall for Chelsea, but credit to Wolves on that result. But I guess let's just quickly mention some of the remaining results that took place this weekend. And one thing I did want to mention quickly is Dominic Solanke got a hat-trick for Bournemouth in a 3-2 win away to Nottingham Forest. So big shout out to him. A player that I think I mentioned a little bit. I think we all kind of talked about throughout the season, but he's coming big. I think it's 11 goals in the Premier League so far. I think it's one of the best returns that he's gotten so far in his career, and it's only been Christmas. So big shout out to him. We'll see what else he does. But any other games or results that stood out to you, Mac, this weekend?
Great call on Solanke. Of course, you have to bring up former Liverpool legend. Maybe he'll, I think the difference is that he's been more clinical in the final third. I think if you look at his chance conversion, it's like 20% in previous years. I saw a stat out there where in previous years you're looking at 6-8, where now he's not just a big body that can link play. If he's going to get those goals too, that puts him into a different conversation. I think the other result that screams out to me is the Luton Town Newcastle result. For both teams, Newcastle, I feel like we keep talking about it, but they're running on fumes. They're just lacking a little bit of energy. They are lacking a little bit of clinical ability in the final third at the moment. Callum Wilson missed a clear header to be able to get them the lead. Or if I don't recall correctly if it was tied if Luton had already picked up their goal at that moment. But at the other side, something you had talked about as kind of a Christmas gift for Luton, trying to pick up some points. This for me was that, considering what happened to the captain in the previous matchup, to be able to come out and at least get a result like this was absolutely huge for them. It puts them in a position where, in all likelihood, they're going to get relegated. but you're at
Right.
least
Right.
keeping hope alive. And a result like this, even over the last 5 games, they've won 2 of them. That's if you keep up the trajectory for the rest of the year. Yes, you'll get out of the bottom 3, but that's not likely to happen. So at least keep hope alive, keep the good feelings going, and any positive momentum they can get out for the community, for the team, for the club, I think is good. And this is something. Again, but the Newcastle side, they need more. It's still, they're not out of touching distance of being in Champions League position. But if they consistently pull in results like this, where they themselves also have only, if I recall correctly, only won 2 of their last 5 games, it's going to put themselves in deeper down the hole later on. So they need to kind of right the ship, get to the new year, get bodies back, and we'll see what happens with that team.
Yeah, exactly. On Luton, quickly before we wrap up the podcast, great win. Fans will be happy going into Christmas that they got the win at home. They face Sheffield next, away from home, team at the bottom of the table. So that's maybe a good sign for them. And before the end of the year, they are hosting Chelsea, who are in shambles at the moment. So maybe at the start of the new year, they
6
will
points,
climb
baby.
out,
6 points. 6 points.
climb out of that relegation battle, and we'll see. We'll have maybe a slight glimmer of hope for them to stay up. So we'll keep an eye out for that. But guys, this concludes our podcast for today. If you guys like what you heard, please like and subscribe to us on our social medias. That's at @houseof_footy. Also, if you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, get in touch with us via email, houseoffooty@hotmail.com. The next time you hear from us will be late next week when we bring you guys our final podcast of the year, looking back at an eventful 2023. So until then, Mac, thank you for joining us.
Happy holidays.
See you guys soon.